It is without question Donald Trump's single biggest vulnerability right now, and the greatest threat to his standing even among his own voters and supporters. Remember, many Americans signed up for a wholesale disruption of the status quo and are not yet startled by the dismantling of federal agencies. Many of them wanted to turn the tables on some of our most trusted alliances, and many approve of more aggressive policies on immigration and deportations. But what no one, not a single voter, signed up for was an economy that is right now flashing red in a state of mortal danger. Just look at how the Dow closed today, down around 700 points. Related or not, just this afternoon, Jerome Powell, chair of the Federal Reserve, expressed some concern today, suggesting tariffs and the uncertainty surrounding their implementation could soon force the central bank to balance two somewhat conflicting goals: controlling inflation and supporting economic growth. The New York Times today adds a new layer to all this. Quote, economists and policymakers are still rubbing their eyes in wonder that an American president single-handedly threw the world into such economic turmoil and then celebrated. Consumer and business confidence has plunged. Uncertainty is paralyzing purchases, from a new home or car to a new factory. Investors have signaled their lack of faith in the U.S. economy by selling off Treasury bonds. That's the traditional haven when the outlook darkens. Again, these developments aren't just a threat to the people of this country and our nation's general sense of self and well-being. They also happen to represent what could be the gravest threat to Donald Trump's political standing ever since he came down the escalator. Recent polling suggests Trump is underwater on the economy. 56% of Americans disapprove of his handling of it. Just 44% approve. But that's the top line. Look deeper. Puck reports this, quote, even Trump's own voters are starting to express real concerns about his ability to bring down costs and manage the economy, an area that was once seen as a key strength of his, given his status as a quote-unquote businessman and candidate for president. Echelon found that while 74% of Trump 2024 voters strongly approve of his immigration policies, just 53% of his voters strongly approve of his handling of the economy. Indeed, there are red flags for Trump lurking in every corner and crosstab of the Echelon poll. Only 44% of voters approve of his handling of the economy, down 5 points since February. On tariffs, 55% of voters disapprove, up 6 points from February. A massive 70% of all voters now say they are concerned about tariffs. A measly 11% of voters say tariffs should be a top priority for the U.S. economy, a hilariously bad number for a key presidential priority. Today, those starved for signs of life from Trump's political opposition would be heartened to see what is actually happening, especially what California Governor Gavin Newsom announced, that he and his attorney general are suing the Trump administration in federal court over those sweeping tariffs. Watch.
We're asserting ourselves on behalf of 40 million Americans. And I imagine if you caucus those 40 million Americans, you'd find few, I don't care where they were in the last election, that are celebrating this uncertainty, that are celebrating the largest tax increase in modern U.S. history.
It's where we start today with some of our most favorite experts, reporters, and friends. CNBC senior economics reporter Steve Liesman is back. Also joining us, David Frum, staff writer for The Atlantic, host of the new video podcast, The David Frum Show. With me at the table, New York Times editorial board member, MSNBC political analyst Mara Gay's here. All right, Steve, I feel like everything, you're E.F. Hutton. I just dated myself forever. But what you say comes to pass, sometimes not in the next news cycle, but certainly by the next couple. And the economic underpinnings of what roiled the markets seem to have seeped into the minds of the voters and the people of this country, but perhaps more notably today, the Fed chair. Tell us what's on your radar.
So we got a 1-2 tariff punch to the market today. We began down sharply when NVIDIA, which you may know as one of the highest flyers of the 7 highest flying stocks we had, announced that it was going to take a very large charge because of a new a restriction being put on the export of chips that it had designed to meet prior export restrictions. Well, the market didn't like that, and it traded down. And that went across the day until about 1:30, when Fed Chair Jay Powell gave a speech and where he said, you know what, these tariffs put us in a particular pickle. We cannot cut rates to save the economy if there's a downturn or a recession, because the tariffs threaten inflation. And only when we are sure that the inflation is temporary can we come in and cut interest rates. Now, of course, this is a particular situation because the Fed usually doesn't have a dilemma between these two situations. When unemployment falls, inflation. When unemployment rises, inflation falls. So it really doesn't have a dilemma. Tariffs do both. They cause the economy to decline and growth to contract, and they cause higher inflation. So the Fed is saying to the markets, we can't help you out here. And the markets took another leg down. It was a really tough day in the markets because the Fed chair said, we can't help.
And you're always so good at tying what the market is reacting to what people will sort of eventually have to contend with. And I've been reading both the Times as well as some regional papers from around the country. That used to be my job in the White House. And people are starting to apply local sort of needs and products to the global crisis that Trump has created. And people are starting to understand that things that are made here and things that are needed here to make things here are all in jeopardy.
I mean, that's right. And I mean, honestly, if the president had stopped for a second to think about any of this stuff, he almost certainly would have come up with a very different policy. But you can see, like when he first put tariffs on the auto companies, 3 days later, he came out and he got rid of them. And then he said, well, no, the auto companies need a little more time. Then he put them back on. Then he took them back off. It's really kind of very difficult for anybody to plan anything right now. But also, what we're learning is just how reliant we are on the imports that we get. If we could have been making it here, we would have been making it here. But there's something I looked at, Nicole, which I think is instructive. There's a thing called raw metals, the making of steel. And there's also fabricated metals. There are 4 times more employees that are working with the raw metals in fabricating it than there are the people who are making the raw steel. So we get these things in, we make profit from it, and we sell it, and we make money. And that's why, I'm sorry, but contrary to what the president says, we're one of the richest countries in the world. We are not poor. Those other countries are not taking advantage of us. That's not what's happening right now. Sure, there are places where we could possibly have a better relationship. But the idea of blowing everything up and then saying, OK, we're going to negotiate it. Well, you just get what you get. You know, you mess around and then you find out. And what we're finding out is that these trade relationships are very important to big companies. And I think what you just said, Nicole, is really significant, that individual Americans are finding out just how important these trade relationships are.
What is the posture of sort of the largest retailers in the country? I mean, my son plays travel baseball, so you go into lots of places, and Walmart is where if you forgot something you need, if you forgot a glove or a sock, they have that. If you need groceries, they have that. I mean, they can be sort of a beating heart of just about anywhere you go. These recognizable retailers that have everything on the shelves at affordable prices. What is the prospect for their ability to sustain prices and sustain supply?
Well, they're warning about all of that. They're warning that their profits may not be so high, or maybe lower than they had been. They're worried about the supply of things. It's interesting you use that word supply, Nicole, because what happened in the pandemic was what's called a supply shock. We couldn't get the stuff we needed. You stopped making cars because you couldn't make chips. And then the whole thing sort of cascades down, and then prices go up. This is going to be a supply shock. It's not like we can't live without these things and won't do okay, but what's going to happen is prices will go up or products won't be available. It's very indicative of what happened during the pandemic, and you have to brace for that. And it's quite remarkable. The pandemic was something that was created by nature and spread. This is something that is completely man-made. And I always say, don't mess around, because The world will come at you with things you haven't thought were coming your way, and you'll have to react. If we had a problem right now in which we needed Europe, Japan, or any of our allies right now, how eager would they be to come to our rescue in the event? You remember the great financial crisis? All the central banks got together and worked together to save the global financial system. Would that happen now? I think there's great risk that it wouldn't.